We're moving on now to talk about the auditory system. So, sound is essentially mechanical energy that's created by vibrating objects in the environment. Vibrations create areas of high and low pressure that bounce off of objects like ripples in a pond. Now, the different types of waves that are created with these vibrations translate into different psychological sensations of sound. So, for example, the amplitude or the height of a wave will determine the wave's loudness, how loud we perceive it to be. So, really loud sounds, for a really loud sound, the amplitude would look something like this. For a really soft sound, the amplitude of the wave would look something like this. Frequency or wavelength translates to pitch. So very high-pitched sounds would have a frequency that resembles this compared to a low-pitched sound. The complexity of the wave or the waveform determines what's called timbre. This is what enables us to differentiate one voice from another, even when that voice might be the same loudness and the same pitch. Same for a musical instrument. If two instruments are playing at the same level or the same amplitude and frequency, it's the waveform that would enable us to distinguish one instrument from another. There are three regions of the ear. The outer ear, which is the pinna. You could actually grab your pinna right now and hold on to it and wiggle it around. This is the pinna. This is the part of the ear that's visible. Your ear canal and your eardrum. The job of the pinna is to funnel these vibrations into the eardrum. The middle ear is made up of three tiny bones that we're going to learn about called ossicles. And the job of the middle ear is to pass on these vibrations and amplify them into the inner ear, which is where the magic happens. It's where transduction happens. There's a structure in the inner ear called the cochlea that's responsible for taking those vibrations, and tiny little hair cells in the cochlea fire action potentials. Think to yourself for a second, where does this occur in the eye? Where does the magic happen in the eye? Hopefully you said on the retina, in the rods and the cones. So similarly, in the ear, transduction occurs in these tiny little hair cells in the cochlea. So similar to how you took notes on the different anatomical features of the eye, you're going to do the same thing for the ear. So again, if you'd like to stop and write, like pause the video and write, and then listen, that would probably be a good idea. So sound waves enter the pinna. You can, again, grab your pinna and wiggle it around, and move through the ear canal to the eardrum, which is also called the tympanic membrane. So picture those vibrations coming in and bouncing off the tympanic membrane or the eardrum into the middle ear, where we have these tiny little ear bones, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. They're named for what they're shaped like. And again, the job of those middle ear bones is to amplify those vibrations and pass them into the inner ear, where we have this snail-shaped structure called the cochlea. When the vibrations hit the cochlea is actually filled with fluid. So what happens is a wave of fluid or a wave is created and spreads through the cochlea, causing vibration in what is called the basilar membrane. And that's a strip of hairy tissue that makes up the inside or lines the inside of the cochlea. You could kind of see the cochlea here. It's like as though we took off the front half of the cochlea and we're looking inside of it. So again, here's where the magic happens. On the basilar membrane of the cochlea, in this tiny cilia, or in these tiny hair cells, these hair cells take in vibrations and fire action potentials, just like the photoreceptors in the retina take in light and fire action potential. Neural messages are then traveling to the auditory cortex via what is called the auditory nerve. So how are auditory and visual sensations alike? Just like with all the senses, we have transduction occurring at the sense receptors in these specialized cells, whether it be the rods and the cones or the hair cells on the basilar membrane of the cochlea. They're both making use of frequency and amplitude and waveform to produce different psychological sensations. The difference is in the cortices in which the messages are received and processed. So visual information sent to the occipital lobe, the visual cortex. Auditory information is sent to the temporal lobe, the auditory cortex. And this enables the brain to produce different sensations, whether it be vision or hearing. There are two different theories that try to explain why we perceive different pitches, like why we perceive some pitches as higher than others or lower than others. One such theory is called place theory. Place theory says that we hear different pitches because different sound waves cause activity along different parts of the basilar membrane. Here's our basilar membrane. So different areas of the basilar membrane are specialized to read different frequencies. So depending upon which area is activated by that wave that we talked about a little while ago, that would determine the pitch that we hear, the pitch of the sound that we hear, according to place theory. Frequency theory, on the other hand, says that we perceive higher pitched sounds because they travel faster along the auditory nerve. So frequency theory says the frequency or the speed of the neural signals traveling along the auditory nerve is what determines pitch.